The jungle at night was never silent. Strange cries echoed through the trees. Shadows moved even when the wind was still, and unseen eyes always watched from the dark. John, a human explorer, walked carefully with a small lamp in his hand. He was used to danger, but this night felt different. Something was following him. Leaves rustled high above, and a sudden hiss made his blood run cold. He raised his lamp and froze. There, behind a wall of vines, two bright eyes glowed back at him, unblinking. He expected an animal, maybe a predator, but what stepped into the light made him lose his breath. It was a girl. She was young, slim, and her skin shone faintly under the lamp. Her hair was tangled with leaves, and her body had no clothing at all. She looked both wild and fragile. Her sharp ears twitched as if catching sounds no human could hear. She did not speak, only stared at him, hissing softly like a cornered creature. John lowered his lamp slowly, showing he meant no harm. He spoke softly. "I will not hurt you." The girl tilted her head, confused, her glowing eyes narrowing. When he took a step forward, she stepped back, her bare feet silent against the damp earth. Her movements were fast, animal-like, but there was intelligence in her gaze. John realized she was not human. Her features were close, but not the same. Her skin too smooth, her eyes too large, her face too delicate. She was alien, and yet here she was, alive in this dangerous jungle. Questions stormed his mind. How long had she been here? Where had she come from? Why was she alone? His hand moved to his pack, pulling out a small piece. Of dried food, he placed it on the ground and stepped back. The girl's nostrils flared, her stomach growled, and she crept forward like a cautious animal. Her long fingers snatched the food and she devoured it quickly. When she finished, she looked at him again, less afraid than before. John smiled, realizing trust could be built. He spoke again, slowly. "Food." "Safe," tapping his chest, then pointing to her. The girl copied his gesture clumsily, tapping her chest, though no words came from her lips. She crouched low, watching him carefully, as if deciding if he was truly safe. The night grew colder, and far away a predator roared. The girl flinched and looked into the darkness with fear. John understood. Alone she had survived this place, but every night must have been a battle. He wondered how many nights she had endured like this. Unclothed, hungry, and alone. He reached out a hand, slow and open. She hissed again, her body tense, but she did not run. Her glowing eyes darted between his face and his hand. Finally, trembling, she touched his fingers with hers, light as a feather. It was the first step of trust, but the jungle was not kind. A sudden crack echoed like a branch snapping under heavy weight. The girl leaped back, her body ready to flee. John raised his lamp high, scanning the trees. Something large moved, just beyond the light, watching, waiting. He felt the weight of danger pressing down on both of them. The girl's eyes widened, and she looked at him with silent desperation. John made a choice, he whispered firmly. "Stay close," and motioned for her to follow. She hesitated, then crept closer, her small frame pressing against his side. They walked quickly, his lamp swinging as shadows moved all around. Every sound seemed louder, every step a risk. John kept glancing back to make sure she stayed near. Though she was silent, her breathing was fast, her fear clear. For the first time, he was not alone in the jungle, and neither was she. When they reached his small camp by the river, John guided her inside the shelter. She looked around with wide eyes, sniffing the blankets, touching the tools. To her, this simple camp was something strange and new. She sat curled near the fire, shivering slightly. John gave her another piece of food and draped a spare cloth over her shoulders. She did not push it away, though she looked uncomfortable wearing it. Still, she did not hiss this time. Instead, she looked at him with cautious eyes and whispered something so soft he almost missed it. A single word, broken and heavy, but clear. Safe. John's heart tightened at the sound. The wild girl from the jungle had spoken her first word. To him, safe. But he knew the jungle would not let them rest for long. This was only the beginning. The night stretched long in the jungle camp. John stayed awake, listening to the strange calls of creatures beyond the firelight. The alien girl sat close to the flames, her knees pulled up, the spare cloth draped awkwardly around her thin frame. She didn't speak again, but her glowing eyes followed every movement he made. It was as if she was trying to learn who he was. Without words, when John reached for his pack, she flinched, ready to run. But when he only pulled out more food, her body relaxed a little. He placed the piece of dried fruit near her feet, then leaned back, showing no threat. Her delicate fingers snatched it, and she ate quickly, licking her lips like she had not tasted sweetness in years. For a moment, John thought he saw something close to a smile flicker across her face. The fire crackled softly. He studied her, carefully, realizing how fragile she looked, skin stretched thin, ribs visible, hair tangled with dirt and leaves. How had she survived this wild place alone? And yet, there was strength in her too. Her eyes burned with the spirit of someone who refused to give up. At last, exhaustion weighed on him. He lay back on his blanket, closing his eyes. But before sleep took him, he felt her move. Opening his eyes slightly, he saw her crawl closer, slow and careful, like a scared animal testing its safety. She settled near his side, still watching, but her body finally rested. Morning came with the sound of birds screeching and water rushing through the river. John sat up and found the girl, crouched near the water's edge, splashing her hands. She looked more alive in the daylight, her silver hair catching the sun, her glowing eyes dimmer but still strange and beautiful. She turned quickly when she heard him rise, hissing out of habit, but stopped when she saw it was only him. Her body relaxed, and for the first time, she didn't back away. John decided to test something. He pointed at himself, tapping his chest. "John." The girl tilted her head, confused. He repeated slowly, "John." After a long pause, she copied the motion, tapping her chest, but no word came. She frowned, frustrated, and hissed softly. He smiled and shook his head, pointing at her instead. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She blinked, silent, then whispered a broken sound. "Ra." The word was rough, heavy on her tongue, but it was clear enough. John nodded. "Lyra," saying it clearly. Her eyes widened as if surprised to hear her own name echoed back. A small trust had been built, but it was fragile. When John tried to step closer, she froze, her muscles tight. Her instincts told her to run at the slightest danger, but she didn't run, not this time. Instead, she let him come closer, staying still like a stone. He gently held out a cup of clean water. She sniffed it, suspicious, before taking it with shaking hands. The water spilled down her chin as she drank greedily. When she finished, she looked at him again, still guarded, but less hostile than before. For the first time, there was no hiss, only silence. John knew others were out there. Hunters roamed these lands, always looking for strange creatures, and word of a wild alien girl would spread fast if anyone saw her. He had to keep her hidden, but she was not easy to hide. Her glowing eyes, her strange skin, her wildness. She stood out in every way. One wrong step and she could be taken away as a specimen. Later that day, he heard voices echoing from deep in the trees. Human voices, men laughing and calling to each other. Lyra's body tensed immediately, her eyes wide with fear. She darted to the edge of the camp, ready to leap into the jungle and vanish. John reached out quickly, placing a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Stay, safe." She froze, staring at him, torn between instinct and his words. He shook his head slowly, guiding her back toward the shelter. The voices grew louder, hunters, moving closer, searching for something. Lyra pressed against him, trembling, her glowing eyes darting around like trapped fireflies. John covered the fire with dirt, killing the smoke, and held her tight until the danger passed. The hunters eventually moved on, their laughter fading into the distance. Lyra finally let out the breath she had been holding, her chest rising and falling rapidly. When John pulled back, he saw her staring at him. Her eyes were still filled with fear, but also with something new. Trust. She had not run even when danger came. She had stayed because of him. That night, as the fire burned low, she curled near him again, this time closer than before. She rested her head on her knees but allowed her shoulder to touch his arm. John did not move, not wanting to scare her away. The silent trust between them was fragile, like thin glass, but it was growing. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this trust would change both their lives forever. The days in the jungle camp passed slowly. Each morning John woke to find Lyra already awake, crouched near the water or watching the trees with sharp eyes. She never wandered far, but she never let herself relax completely, like a bird that expected the net to fall at any moment. She stayed tense, ready to flee. John tried to speak to her every day. He pointed to things, saying their names, hoping she would learn. Fire, he said, tapping the flames. Water, he whispered, touching the river. Sometimes she copied, the sounds clumsy but willing. Other times she only frowned, frustrated when the strange human words refused to form on her tongue. But progress came slowly. One evening, while the fire crackled low, she whispered again, "Safe." The same word she had spoken that first night. John nodded, smiling warmly. Yes, safe. She looked at him, her glowing eyes softer than before, and repeated it with more confidence. That single word became a fragile bridge between them, yet fear still lived inside her. One night, as John sat cleaning his tools, Lyra suddenly froze, her ears twitching toward the jungle. Before he could react, she darted behind him, crouching low, her fingers digging into the dirt. A shadow moved in the trees, and a low growl rumbled through the night. John grabbed his lamp, scanning the darkness. Two yellow eyes glared back from the underbrush, a predator larger than any wolf. Its teeth bared, Lyra whimpered. Pressing her forehead into the earth, too scared to move, John stood firm, shouting loudly and waving fire to scare the beast away. The predator snarled but finally backed into the trees, melting into the shadows. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of Lyra's shaky breathing. When John turned, he saw tears running down her face. She wiped them quickly, ashamed, and hissed softly, as if cursing herself for weakness. John crouched low, speaking gently, "Safe, safe," repeating the word she knew. Slowly, she looked up, her glowing eyes wet. It was the first time he realized how deep her fear ran. The next morning, when the sun lit the jungle in gold, she finally spoke more. Her voice was broken, halting, but she tried. "Family, gone," she whispered, her head bowed. John's chest tightened. He asked carefully, "Crash," pointing at the sky, motioning downward. Her lips trembled, and she nodded, her small hands making a motion of fire and falling. Her family's ship had fallen here, destroyed in flames. She alone had survived. The words came slowly, mixed with gestures, but the meaning was clear. She had been a child when it happened. The jungle had raised her in its cruel way, feeding her fear, shaping her into something half-wild. John listened silently, his heart heavy. No wonder she hissed at every sound. No wonder she hated the dark. She had grown up hunted, alone, with no one to call safe until now. That night, when the fire burned low, John gave her a blanket of his own. She clutched it tightly, curling into it as if it were more than cloth. It was warmth, protection, a reminder that she was no longer alone. Before sleep, she whispered another broken phrase, "John, safe." He looked at her, surprised to hear his name leave her lips for the first time. Her voice cracked but carried trust. It was the beginning of something deeper, but danger was never far. The next day, while they searched for fruit, John noticed footprints near the riverbank. Not hers, not his, but heavy boots pressed deep into the mud. Hunters. His stomach clenched. If they found her, they would not see a frightened girl. They would see a prize, something to capture and sell. He moved quickly, covering the tracks near their camp. Lyra noticed his urgency and hissed nervously, her glowing eyes darting to the jungle. He whispered, again, "Quiet, safe." But his own voice carried fear. That night, they heard voices echoing again, closer than before, men calling, torches flickering between the trees. Lyra pressed close to John, trembling. Her instincts screamed for her to run, but her new trust in him kept her frozen in place. She whispered a new word, one she had never spoken before. Fear. Her voice breaking. John wrapped an arm around her shoulders, whispering back, "No fear. Safe." Though he was not sure it was true. The hunters passed by, their footsteps crunching in the dark. Lyra's small hand gripped his arm so tightly it left marks. When silence returned, she finally let go, collapsing against him, exhausted. Her body shook as she whispered again, "Fear. No more." John didn't answer, but inside he promised himself she would never be taken. That night, under the silent stars, Lyra rested closer to him than ever before. Her glowing eyes finally closed in sleep, her face peaceful for once, and John, staring into the dark, knew their fragile trust had turned into something stronger. He was no longer just a stranger who gave her food. He was her shield against the fear that had haunted her all her life. And for that, he would fight anyone, even the entire world. The jungle could hide them only for so long. John knew the hunters would not give up, and sooner or later, they would find the trail. Lyra could not live forever in fear, trembling at every sound, hiding from every shadow. She needed safety, real safety, and John knew the jungle could never give her that. One morning he watched her crouched near the water, splashing her hands, her silver hair catching the sun. She looked fragile and strong at the same time, but still too wild for the world beyond. John sighed, thinking of the city far away. It was loud, dangerous, full of eyes and whispers, but at least it was safer than hunters in the jungle, and there maybe she could live a different life. He packed his small camp with quiet urgency. Lyra tilted her head, curious, her glowing eyes watching as he tied his pack and slung it over his shoulder. She hissed softly when he motioned for her to follow, but she obeyed, stepping close to his side. Her trust was still fragile, but it was trust all the same. The journey out of the jungle was long. They crossed rivers, climbed steep paths, and pushed through endless trees. Lyra moved silently, barefoot, her instincts guiding them away from predators before John even heard them. But every sound from afar made her flinch, every broken branch a threat. John whispered often, "Safe, safe," reminding her that she was not alone. At last, after days of walking, the trees thinned, the jungle opened to a wide road of stone, and in the distance, lights glimmered like stars fallen to the ground. The city. Lyra froze, staring at it with wide, glowing eyes. She had never seen so many lights, so many shapes moving beyond the horizon. To her, it was another world. John placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Safe," he whispered, though his own stomach twisted with doubt. Together they walked the road, and soon the noise of the city wrapped around them. Voices, wheels, footsteps, machines roaring. Lyra pressed against John, clutching his arm, her whole body trembling. People stared. Some gasped. Others whispered, their eyes fixed on the strange girl with glowing eyes and bare feet. Lyra hissed low, hiding her face against John's shoulder. He kept moving quickly, guiding her away from the curious stares. But whispers spread like fire, and already men turned to follow. John realized quickly, if she stayed like this, everyone would know she was different. She needed clothes, something to hide her wildness, something to help her blend in. He whispered to her, "Shop, clothes," pointing to the buildings. She frowned, confused, but followed when he guided her into a narrow street lined with vendors and shops. Inside the first store, the workers froze. A young woman dropped her basket when she saw Lyra, her mouth opening in shock. An older man frowned deeply, whispering. To another, John felt the tension rise instantly, but he forced a calm smile and motioned for clothes, pointing to Lyra. Lyra shrank back, clinging to his arm, her glowing eyes darting across the walls of fabric. When one worker tried to approach her with a dress, she hissed sharply, her wild side breaking through. The worker stumbled back, muttering something about creatures. John raised a hand, quickly protecting her. "No harm, just clothes," he said firmly. He knelt down, holding a soft cloth in his own hands, showing her it was safe. "Where?" he said gently, pressing it to his chest, then motioning to her. Lyra frowned, uncertain, but slowly reached out, touching the fabric. Her fingers ran across it, her glowing eyes curious. She tried to put it on clumsily, twisting it around her frame. John helped carefully, moving slowly so she wouldn't panic. At last, she stood in a simple dress, awkward but covered. She shifted uncomfortably, pulling at the fabric, not used to it. But when she saw her reflection in a mirror across the shop, she stopped. Her eyes widened, and for the first time she stared at herself not as a wild jungle girl, but something else. Her lips trembled, and John saw a flicker of pride in her eyes. But danger returned quickly. Outside the shop, heavy boots echoed on the street, and voices spoke in sharp tones. Guards. They had heard whispers of a glowing-eyed girl, and now they were searching. The shopkeeper glanced nervously at the door. Muttering under his breath, John grabbed coins from his pouch, tossing them onto the counter, and pulled Lyra close. "Come," he whispered urgently, leading her out the back. Through narrow alleys they ran, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Lyra clung to his hand, her bare feet silent on the stones, her breathing fast. Her new dress flapped awkwardly as she ran, but she did not let go. Behind them, voices shouted, "There, find them." They turned corners, slipping into shadows. Pressing against walls, John's heart pounded as torches swept the alleys, light spilling dangerously close. Lyra pressed against him, her glowing eyes dimmed in fear. For a moment John thought they were caught, but the guards moved past, missing them in the darkness. When silence finally returned, Lyra's grip on his hand tightened, her body shook, but her eyes locked on his. "Safe," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. John nodded, brushing dirt from her hair. "Safe," he promised. But he knew the city was full of eyes, full of whispers. Their journey here had only just begun. The narrow alleys gave them a few moments of safety, but John knew it would not last. Whispers had already spread through the city, and guards would not stop until they found the strange, glowing-eyed girl. Lyra pressed against his side, her new dress awkward on her thin frame, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She was learning to trust him, but the city was overwhelming. Every noise too loud, every light too bright. Every stranger a danger. John led her through the winding streets until they reached another clothing shop, larger than the first, its windows glowing with lantern light. He hesitated, but they had no choice. The dress she wore was too plain, and it would not be enough to help her blend in. She needed proper clothing, something that would hide her alien features from the curious eyes of strangers. Taking a deep breath, John pushed open the door and guided her inside. The shop was busy, filled with chatter, fabric rustling, and the clink of coins. Customers turned to look as John and Lyra entered, and silence spread like a ripple. Lyra froze, her hand tightening on John's arm, her glowing eyes darting around the room. A child pointed and gasped, "She's glowing." Whispers followed instantly, voices sharp and curious. John moved quickly, forcing a smile at the shopkeeper. "Clothes. We need clothes," he said firmly, dropping a handful of coins on the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes flicked nervously to Lyra, then back to the coins. Greed softened his face, and he nodded, motioning to the racks of dresses and cloaks. "Choose quickly," he muttered, his voice low, "before the guards see." John turned to Lyra, trying to calm her. He picked up a soft cloak, showing it to her, and pressed it against his chest. "Wear." But Lyra shook her head, hissing softly, her wild instincts rising again. She had never worn such things before, and the weight of so many eyes made her feel trapped. She backed toward the door, panic in her glowing gaze. The shopkeeper frowned, raising his voice. "Control her, or leave." The words stung Lyra, though she did not understand them fully. She only felt the anger in his tone, the way the humans stared as if she were not a person, but a creature on display. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and she hissed again, louder this time. Gasps filled the shop, and one woman screamed, "Monster!" John stepped forward quickly, blocking their stares. "Stop, she's not a monster," he shouted, his voice sharp. But already someone was rushing to the door, calling for the guards. The sound of boots echoed outside, heavy and fast. Lyra's. Panic broke free. She grabbed a rack of clothes and knocked it to the ground, fabric spilling everywhere. Chaos erupted, customers screamed and pushed toward the exit. While the shopkeeper shouted angrily, John grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her close. "Stay with me, safe," he whispered desperately. But she was trembling, her glowing eyes wide, her breath fast and shallow. The sound of boots grew louder, closer, filling the street outside. John made a quick choice. He grabbed a long cloak from the fallen rack and wrapped it around Lyra, pulling the hood low over her head. "Hide," he whispered, pressing her close against his chest. She clung to him, still shaking, but she obeyed, her wild instincts giving way to the fragile trust she had built with him. The door slammed open and 2 guards stepped inside, their torches lighting the shop. "Where is she?" one demanded, scanning the room. The shopkeeper hesitated, torn between greed and fear, his eyes flicking toward John and Lyra. John tightened his grip on her hand, stepping back slowly. "She's not here," he said calmly, trying to mask the pounding of his heart. The guard frowned, suspicious, and moved closer. Lyra's breath caught, her glowing eyes hidden under the hood. If she moved even slightly, they would see her, and everything would be lost. John's mind raced, searching for a way out. Then suddenly a loud crash echoed from the street outside, another shop cart tipping over, a distraction. The guards turned their heads instantly, muttering curses. "Check it," one said, and they rushed out, leaving the shop behind. John exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. But the shopkeeper's eyes narrowed, and his voice was sharp. "You bring danger into my shop, leave now." He pointed to the door, his hand trembling. John nodded quickly, pulling Lyra close as they slipped out the back. The night air was cold and the street still buzzed with voices, but at least they were free for the moment. Lyra clung to him, her hands shaking, her glowing eyes dim under the hood. She whispered a single word, broken and heavy. "Safe." John held her tighter, whispering back, "Safe. Always." But deep inside, he knew it was a fragile lie. The city was not safe. Not for her. Not while guards hunted and whispers spread. And the more she was seen, the more danger would come. The clothing shop had given them a cloak, but it had also marked them. Now the city itself seemed to turn its eyes toward them. And John knew the real chaos had only just begun. The city no longer felt like stone and light. It felt like a trap closing in around them. Every whisper seemed louder, every step behind them sharper. John kept Lyra close as they hurried through the narrow streets, her hood drawn low, her glowing eyes hidden in the shadow of the cloak. But no disguise could last forever. The city was awake and restless, and already the guards were moving. By morning, posters appeared nailed to walls, rough sketches of a strange girl with glowing eyes. The reward offered was more than most people made in a year. John tore one down with shaking hands, his stomach tight. They were hunting her, not as a person but as a prize, a treasure to be caught. Lyra tilted her head at the torn poster, not understanding the words but sensing his fear. She whispered softly, "Fear," her voice trembling. John forced a smile, brushing her silver hair under the hood. "No fear, safe," he whispered, but his voice was thin. They slipped into the market, hoping to vanish in the crowd. Vendors shouted, selling fruit, meat, cloth, their voices mixing into a wall of sound. The air smelled of spice and smoke. For a moment John thought it would work, that the noise would hide them, but then a voice shouted, "There, the girl." The crowd parted as 2 guards pushed through, their torches burning even in daylight. Lyra flinched, her glowing eyes catching a ray of light beneath the hood, betraying her. Gasps erupted around them, people pointing, some reaching for the reward posters. The chase began. John grabbed her hand, pulling her down a side street. "Run," he whispered, and she obeyed, her bare feet light on the stones. Behind them, boots thundered, voices shouting orders. The narrow street twisted, but the guards knew the city better than John did. They were closing in fast. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps, her eyes wide with panic. Her cloak snagged on a cart, tearing slightly. John yanked it free, but every second lost felt like a rope tightening around their necks. A guard appeared ahead, blocking the path. John didn't hesitate. He shoved a barrel forward, knocking the man off balance, and pulled Lyra through. They darted into another alley, dark and wet. The smell of rotten food filled the air. Rats scattered at their footsteps, but even here, shouts echoed. "Block the other end, don't let them escape." John's chest burned, his legs heavy, but he didn't stop. Lyra stumbled, almost falling, but John caught her arm. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice raw. She nodded quickly, her trust holding her together, even as fear shook her bones. Together they burst out of the alley into a wider street, filled with carts and horses. The sudden noise and movement gave them cover, but also danger. A horse reared at the sight of Lyra's glowing eyes as her hood slipped. People screamed, carts tipped, chaos spread, guards shouted, pushing through the mess. John pulled the hood back down and dragged her into the crush of bodies. The market had turned into a shield of chaos, but only for a moment. They slipped into a stone archway, climbing a narrow stairwell that smelled of damp. The stairs led to the rooftops, broken tiles and chimneys under the gray sky. From up there, the city spread like a maze, full of smoke and movement. John helped Lyra climb, her feet slipping on the rough tiles. "Careful," he whispered, though he knew there was no careful way to run across roofs. The guards followed, their boots clattering against the stairs. Arrows hissed through the air, striking the tiles with sharp cracks. Lyra cried out, ducking low, her cloak fluttering. Like a torn wing, John shielded her with his body, moving quickly across the rooftops. One wrong step would send them both falling to the stones below. They leaped from one roof to another, the gap wide but not impossible. John made it first, then turned to catch Lyra as she jumped. Her small hands gripped his tightly and he pulled her up behind them. The guards hesitated, their armor heavy. It gave them a few seconds, just enough. At last they ducked into a crumbling tower, dust filling the air as they stumbled inside. The sound of boots faded for the moment, the chase broken. John leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Lyra clung to him, her body trembling, her glowing eyes dim with exhaustion. She whispered a single word, soft but heavy. "Safe." John held her close, brushing dirt from her cheek. "Yes, safe," he whispered, though his own body ached and his lungs burned. But he knew the truth. The city was too dangerous, the guards too determined. Every step forward tightened the net around them. Their trust had carried them this far, but trust alone would not be enough. That night, as they rested in the shadows of the old tower, John thought of their next move. They couldn't run forever. Not through streets filled with eyes. Not with her glowing gaze betraying them at every turn. He looked at Lyra, curled against him, clutching the torn cloak as if it were her only shield. Her voice came again, broken but clear. "John, safe." And though fear pressed in from every side, he whispered back, "Always." But outside, in the dark streets, voices still searched, boots still echoed. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. The crumbling tower gave them shelter, for one night, but John knew it would not hold forever. The guards would search every street, every shadow, until they found the glowing-eyed girl. The reward posters still clung to walls, and whispers spread faster than fire. Staying in the city meant capture, but leaving meant another kind of danger. John sat in the dark, sharpening his knife with tired hands, his mind racing. Beside him, Lyra slept curled in her cloak, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Even in sleep, her fingers gripped his sleeve as if afraid he might vanish. The bond between them had grown stronger than words, but the world outside did not see her as a girl, only as prey. When dawn came, John shook her gently. "We must go," he whispered. Lyra stirred, her glowing eyes blinking in the pale light. She frowned, her lips forming a single word, "Run." He nodded, "Yes, run." She rose quickly, trust shining in her tired gaze. They slipped from the tower into the waking streets. The city was alive again, vendors shouting, carts creaking, children running. But danger lingered in every corner, armored boots patrolling, eyes watching. John guided Lyra into the crowd, moving fast but steady, every turn. Every step carried the weight of pursuit. It wasn't long before shouts rose again. "There, the girl!" The crowd scattered, people pushing each other aside as guards closed in. Lyra clutched John's hand, her hood slipping, her glowing eyes. Flashing in panic, arrows hissed, striking wood and stone. John pulled her into a narrow passage, his heart pounding. The chase twisted through alleys and bridges. At last, they burst out onto the edge of the city where walls met open fields. The gates loomed ahead, guarded by soldiers. John's chest tightened. There was no way through without being caught. Lyra's breath came fast, her voice breaking. "Safe," she whispered desperately. He looked at her, and in that moment he made his choice. Not to fight the city. Not to fight the guards, but to outwit them. He pulled her into the shadows near a merchant caravan preparing to leave. Horses stamped their hooves. Wagons loaded with goods creaked and groaned. John slipped coins into the driver's hand, whispering urgently, "No questions. Just carry us through." The driver hesitated, but greed won. He nodded and motioned. Them inside a wagon piled high with cloth. Lyra crouched low among the fabrics, her glowing eyes hidden. John pulled the cover tight and held his breath as the wagon rolled forward. Boots clattered outside, voices questioned the caravan. "Any sign of them?" a guard demanded. The driver shook his head. "Only goods, only trade." The guard searched, pulling back covers, tossing crates. John held Lyra close, praying the cloth would hide her light. Her hand gripped his tightly, and for once she did not tremble. After what felt like hours, the wagon rolled forward, past the gates. The noise of the city faded behind them, replaced by the soft rhythm of wheels, on dirt. Only then did John exhale, his body sagging in relief. Lyra lifted her hood, her glowing eyes shimmering in the morning sun. She looked at him, whispering softly, "Safe." For the first time, John believed it. The fields stretched wide, green and open, no walls, no hunters, only freedom. He smiled, brushing dirt from her hair. "Yes, safe," he said firmly. Lyra leaned against him, her small body warm beneath the cloak. For the first time since he had found her in the jungle, she truly looked at peace. Days passed as they traveled far from the city. They found shelter in an old farmhouse, abandoned years ago. John repaired the roof, fixed the doors, and lit a small fire inside. Lyra explored the place curiously, her glowing eyes wide at the strange tools and wooden walls. Here she did not hiss at every sound. Here she laughed softly for the first time. Each evening John taught her more words. She learned quickly now, speaking his name with strength, saying water, food, fire with a smile. Her favorite word remained safe, but now she used it with joy, not fear. The girl who once trembled at shadows was beginning to live again, and John felt something he had not felt in years. Hope, but shadows still lingered. One evening, as the sun dipped low, John saw a figure on the distant road, watching, unmoving. A silhouette against the fading light. He tensed, his hand moving to his knife. The figure turned and disappeared into the horizon, leaving questions behind. John said nothing to Lyra, not wanting to shatter her new peace. But deep inside he knew the truth. The world would not forget her, not the city, not the hunters, not those who saw her as a prize. Their quiet farmhouse life might only be temporary, but he also knew one thing with certainty. He would protect her no matter what came. That night, as stars filled the sky, Lyra sat beside the fire, her cloak around her shoulders. She leaned close to John and whispered softly, "Home." The word was new, broken but full of meaning. John looked at her, his chest tight, and nodded. Yes, home. It was not the end of their journey, but it was the beginning of something new. A new life, a new bond, a new story waiting to be written.